Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Martha Bremer, Director of Fuse and Leadership Duluth. I'd like to thank you for joining us and thank our sponsor, the Duluth News Tribune, for their support of this forum. A few things to note for our attendees. You will remain muted during the entire session. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we will address them during the Q&A portion. And with that, I'd like to introduce the Director of CareerForce, Elena Foshay. Good morning, Elena.
Good morning, Martha. Thank you. So thanks to all of our presenters for being here. I know people are logging in right now as we speak. So I'll just give a quick overview of the agenda. You know, I want to appreciate the Duluth Chamber for co-sponsoring this event with us. You know, we just were kind of talking and realizing that this was a very important and timely topic and feeling like we wanted to support employers in figuring out how to support their employees and continue to get their work done while also, you know, creating a workplace that is going to allow their employees to navigate what this next school year is going to look like. So thanks for pulling this together, helping to pull this together on short notice. So just to give a quick overview of the agenda while people log in, we are going to have the Duluth Public Schools Superintendent, John Magas, join us shortly to review the Duluth Public Schools Return to Learn plan. And then Dave Cook from the Northeast Minnesota Office of Job Training is going to give us a quick overview of district plans from some of the surrounding districts, because we understand that, you know, people live and work all over the Twin Ports region. We're going to have Corey Walton present some provisions of the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act. Yes, I got it right. Just talking about some of the new measures signed into law to try to support families. And then we have Laura Weintraub from AimClear to give an employer perspective, talk about some of the ways that they have been trying to create a supportive workplace for their employees. And then of course we'll have lots of time for questions and discussion. So like Martha said, you know, type your questions into the chat. Sean will capture those. And then when we get to the Q&A, we'll try to answer them as best we can. So why are we talking about this? I'm going to just quickly share my screen. Hopefully this works this time. Okay. So Martha, is that working? Okay, fabulous. Now, can I advance the slides? That's the next question. There we go. Okay, so we talked about the agenda. So why are we talking about this? This school year is going to be a bit of a roller coaster ride. Working parents are navigating being employees, teachers, childcare providers all at the same time. Employers are needing consistent and dependable employees, right? So they can ensure their businesses and organizations can successfully ride the wave. Parents are having to make some difficult choices, and some are being forced to consider quitting their jobs to be able to manage homeschooling and childcare. But we recognize that employee turnover has a great cost for employers and that they benefit from retaining their existing employees. So that's kind of why we're having this conversation today, is we want to help employers retain working parents, and we want to help working parents retain their employment, but be able to manage all the responsibilities that are now on their plate. So, you know, ultimately it all has a huge impact on the economy. We know that both employees and employers need predictability, and we're trying to create that in a time that's highly unpredictable. So hopefully by the end of today, folks will walk away with some ideas for how they can create some level of predictability in their workplace. So I wanted to share this data just really quickly. This is from Carson Borky, who's our DEED labor market analyst here in Duluth. About half of children, so this data is we have Duluth and we have St. Louis County, which is the best way that we can break down the data. So about half of children, so this is looking at children under the age of 18, about half of them have both parents in the labor force. In Duluth, about 76% of children live with two parents, with both of those parents working. There are, however, quite a bit of families where there's a single parent, and most of those families have that single parent is in the labor force, is working. So that's one thing to consider, right, is when you're thinking about working parents, it's a really different story if it's a two-parent family versus a single-parent family. And single parents have a lot more to navigate in terms of thinking about homeschooling, childcare, all that. So I wanted to just really quickly, before we dove into our first speaker, give a quick overview of CareerForce to make sure that folks are familiar with who we are. So CareerForce in Duluth is the local office of Minnesota's public workforce system. We serve everyone, whether you're working, laid off, unemployed, looking to return to the workforce, or just looking for information. So you can see on the screen our contact information. Please reach out. We've got all kinds of virtual services, workshops, live interactive services available through our website. You can call our front desk and we'll connect you to the right place. We also have services for employers. Employers are key customers. So we can help employers with designing workforce strategies, recruiting candidates, which is particularly tricky right now in this time where everything has gone virtual. Training your existing workforce, we have different programs for that. Accessing state and federal resources. And then we work very closely with employers on providing paid work experience for youth, adults, and older workers, and then designing customized training. These are just a few of our free virtual services for job seekers, and these are for all job seekers, no matter what your previous profession was, or whether you're returning to the workforce, or whatever your situation is. So we have resume writing classes, interview classes. You can get somebody to review your resume and give feedback. You can sign up for a brief meeting with a job counselor to just kind of point you to some resources in the right direction. We have career fairs and hiring events. We have virtual workshops. So you can find all of these on careerforcemn.com. So that's just a quick overview of our services. I'll stop sharing there. Okay, so it looks like we have Superintendent John Magas on the line from Duluth Public Schools. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. I know that you're super, super busy right now, but it is really helpful to have you here and to have your perspective. So I am going to mute myself and hand it over to Superintendent Magas.
Thank you. And actually, I'm on two different screens. One, because I'm having some microphone problems, so I'm sorry that you've got an image of me there as video, and then that's my Google image there. So before I had some gray hairs from the process that we're all trying to work through to the best of our abilities. I just want to see about presenting, and I'm looking here trying to find if there's a possibility for me to take over the screen for a presentation, or if just looking here on Zoom here, I'm not seeing it on my screen here. So I'm not sure if it's just because I'm coming on as a guest, or if there is another way to do so. So where is the share screen on the Zoom call? I'm not seeing it.
Should be just on the bottom of your screen, John.
Yeah, and again, that's where I always see it, but I'm wondering if it's not coming up for some reason.
No? Okay. I just made you a host, so
okay.
See if that helps. Did you get it there?
I wonder if I have to leave and come back in as a host, or what I could do is, and I'm not, just one sec.
Sure.
Nope. What I could do is I could share the presentation with one of you, and then I could talk through it if that would work. So somebody else could share their screen. Elena, should I share it with you?
Yep, that's just fine. Send it to me and I'll look it up.
And could you give me your email address really quick? I apologize for that. Could you share your email with me just really quick?
Yep. So it's efoshay@duluthmn.gov.
Okay, there it is. And I can share it with the group as well afterwards. So there you go. It's sending. So basically, the process that we've used is really complex, and it's a challenging situation for all of us. You know, I think that especially for you, looking at it from the commerce perspective, looking at it from the economy perspective, there are so many factors that you need us to consider and want us to consider that are important. We're considering the needs of the district as a whole and the needs of the community, and trying to balance safety while we're also trying to balance the learning needs of our students is critical. But we also know that childcare piece has a huge impact on our parents. And I hate to look at it this way, but to some degree, we know that no matter what plan we select, it's trying to choose the least worst or the least impactful, negatively impacting plan. We know that in-person learning with our kids in school is what we want, yet we have to balance the safety perspectives too. Is it coming up there, Elena? Looks like it's screen sharing.
Can you see it now?
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you could press view and go into present, and if you don't mind, I'll walk you through it. So, and I think people might be able to see better if you click on go to view and click present, the button down from there. No. Oh. So.
I don't think I have that setting on
okay.
my.
I apologize.
Yeah.
So this first slide, there's a hyperlink to our full plan, which is 30 plus pages that details many of the questions that you may have related to safety, what the day looks like, what our supports look like. And I'll go through things relatively quickly because I know that there are videos there that will walk you through the different parts of the plan. All of these presentations are posted too, so if you wanted more information, you can learn more there. We are also putting together, so we sent out a video yesterday, we're sending out a video later this week. Each week we're trying to send out videos kind of explaining where we're at in the process so people can hear. But if you could click to the second slide. We look at a variety of guiding principles when we make our decision. We're trying to make sure that we're ensuring the safety and wellness of the students and staff. We want to make sure we're delivering high quality instruction to students, regardless of the delivery model. And we also want to make sure that we're serving kids in an equitable way. We also want to make sure that we're optimizing use of resources. And that came into big play when we made our most recent change. Because of the facilities perspectives and the human resources, there are huge challenges there. And an important part of the guiding principles too is that we're taking community and stakeholder engagement in the plan. And so we're trying to communicate as frequently as possible. And if you could, next slide. So the next slide shows that we are, that there are a number of different governor's orders, executive orders that give us guidance in what we are to do and what we should be doing. And that all changes relatively quickly. Like there are, like I was on the phone yesterday with the executive director of the Administrators Association, talking with the also with the commissioner for the Department of Education, trying to get answers about certain things that are not as clear. So many districts, all the districts, are trying to make sure that the guidance, because it's very complex, is clearly laid out. And if you follow the news in other districts too, you'll see that there are changes in model and plan based partly on those needs. So we also, at the bottom, you see that there are a number of surveys that have gone out. We've met with our leadership teams. We've had a lot of stakeholder input, including a district advisory team that's made up of a wide variety of members of the community, many parents from a variety of different schools, teachers, administrators, the mayor, a number of different people that are part of that advisory group to give us input. You can go to the next slide. So our rule in our decision making is that we need to follow that state guidance, but take local input. So we need to look at the county COVID numbers and how that affects our model. But when we look at the COVID numbers for Duluth in particular, they are very different than St. Louis County as a whole. If I drive 20 miles into the woods, there are going to be fewer COVID cases than there are in downtown Duluth. So we have to look at what is our specific situation here. And again, trying to emphasize safety of student and staff as an important priority, and also thinking about prioritizing in-person learning especially for our younger learners. So those are some of the things that we look at. If you can flip to the next slide. This is the chart that we use that the state has given for the number of COVID cases that we can have per 10,000 in a 14-day period. The challenge with this is that we're looking at data, we're looking at 2 weeks of data that's already a week old in a time that is changing quickly. And so we want to make sure that we are using that data very carefully, and it's a primary concern, but we also want to make sure that we're looking at the trend of where it's going and being thoughtful there. Next slide, please. I appreciate this, Elena, very much. Again, other things that we're looking at are many of the needs that we're considering are interpreting the changing guidance, need for families and staff to have answers. This is what this is about, trying to make sure that there's greater clarity. There are workforce concerns, like you just mentioned, childcare needs during hybrid, space constraints, because if we're having kids spaced out in our schools, but we actually have about 1,000 kids, over 1,000 kids that have expressed the parents are registering as essential workers. And so we have over 1,000 kids that we're going to be providing childcare for. If we're doing hybrid at the same time, where we're trying to keep our students as spaced out in the school as possible, it makes it very challenging to find the room for that. And then transportation, it can be an issue as well. And unfortunately, the budget for the Duluth Public Schools isn't where it will be or where it needs to be over time. So on the next slide, we just kind of go through a little bit more of our decision-making process. Again, the state provides data for us, and then we determine our plan, and we have to implement a plan of in-person learning, hybrid learning, or distance learning, or a combination of those three. Next slide, please. So we really at all times have to plan for 3 different scenarios at all of the different levels. We have to plan for what could an in-person look like, what could hybrid look like, and what could distance learning 2.0 look like. At all times too, we're allowing our students and parents to make a selection for distance learning if that's their preference. Next slide, please. We also are required to make sure that we're flexible, because we know that the needs could change based on the COVID numbers or other factors. And so we have to be ready for all of the models at every time. Next slide, please. And I know I'm going through kind of fast, but so again, we have to make sure that we're moving between those different models and ready to move. Next slide. In-person learning is really about making sure that students can attend in person. We try to follow good space needs as much as possible, but there isn't a requirement for strict social distancing in regular in-person learning. But we do make sure that we're doing things like mask wearing, frequent hygiene, hand washing, cleaning of surfaces, and reducing student movement. And again, if we ever are in an in-person mode or any mode that is not complete distance, parents always have the option for complete distance. Next slide. Our distance learning is going to be quite a bit different this year than it was in the past. Distance learning is, of course, learning from home. And there's a big improvement over the emergency spring model. The emergency spring model, there were a lot of packets. There wasn't a lot of direct interaction or feedback from teachers. And that's something that we really have to learn from those lessons and make changes. That was something that I think most districts across the country have learned. How are we going to do distance learning much better? And we're making significant investment in devices for students and ways of providing Wi-Fi accessibility, partnerships, and looking at hotspots. We've talked about that many times, as well as spreading Wi-Fi into a number of different housing areas and such. We also have 2 new learning platforms, Seesaw and Canvas, And we're working to make sure that our teachers are having professional development so they are as prepared as possible. Then hybrid learning is, as we said, a split where kids are going, basically they're doing some distance learning during the week, they're doing some learning in person, and the priority is given to elementary students in that case. So the next slide is just a transition of what is our current recommendation. You probably saw it in the news already that we did make a shift based on new information. And at this time, based on the Safe Learning Guidelines, we're recommending elementary hybrid and secondary distance. And I'll share why. We've also said, because we can't be flipping back and forth, that we are committed to this model through the first quarter of the school year, that's November 6th, unless there are any major COVID changes. If there's a huge increase, or if if we were very lucky and had very successful treatment or vaccine that we know will take time to roll out, that would be something that might potentially change those factors. But next slide shows, again, the factors that are looked at for that decision making, and one of which is the data. And if you can actually flip 2 slides ahead where it says District Advisory Committee. Our District Advisory Committee that I mentioned earlier, when they met, they agreed that there were very significant challenges related to space. How do we put 1,000 childcare kids in distance learning when we're using our schools in a hybrid format? And when we tried our best to make that work, we realized that we were bringing students in person one day a week part-time, and the space and the physical limitations were of concern there. That was something that the advisory committee was concerned about. And again, next slide shows the childcare needs. And I've talked about the space concerns, but with 1,000 kids needing childcare, that can be a huge challenge for us. The next slide talks about at the secondary level, things are very challenging for distance learning if you were doing it in a hybrid. It allows us to focus on doing one thing well, which is providing high quality distance, but at the same time, we will have in-person opportunities for support, and we'll be sharing more information at the end of the week, or probably tomorrow. Our principals are meeting right now to formalize that information so that we can share it out with people. But if we were in secondary hybrid, the teachers would be trying to teach the hybrid in-person students, the hybrid remote students who are home for the day, and also full distance learners all at the same time. And we want to focus first on doing distance learning well, so that our teachers are well prepared to serve our students to the best degree possible. And then the next slide, I think this is really critical. When we look at our Duluth specific data, this is, even though this is older data, but this is the official data we have until tomorrow or Friday when the new data comes out. But if you look at that blue line, we are heading up very quickly with our COVID rates here, according to the most current official data we have. And the highest number of people who are showing COVID positiveness are kids who are in their late teens or early 20s. So there's a lot of illness spreading in those groups, and it's not necessarily determined where it's coming from, because it's not like there are single sources. It's a community spread that's happening amongst our older teens and 20-somethings. And as we bring in college students, there's concern that rate will go up. I work on a nearly daily basis with the St. Louis County Health Department and looking at their numbers. There may be a little plateau in this next week's numbers, but there is significant concern that the numbers will continue to rise. The next slide basically just shows our additional resources that I mentioned, so that if you're wanting to learn more about our plan, you can learn many things there. If you are, I'll let people explore that as they may, but I appreciate the time to run through our plan relatively quickly. I know that there are a lot of concerns, but I'd be glad to answer questions if there's time, if time permits, or depending on what you need.
So thank you for that. It's I really appreciate all the hard work, the thought, the analysis, and the multiple complicated factors that you and your staff and the school board are trying to juggle in figuring out a school plan. So thank you so much for walking us through the thought process and where things have landed as of this week. So I know that we have time for Q&A at the end. Were there any quick questions that the superintendent could answer right now, or should we move on? So there was one question about, do we have a current number of where we are at on the chart? So Superintendent Magas, it sounds like there will be a new round of data tomorrow or Friday that'll answer that question. Is that right?
The information I just shared was is the most current official information that we have, and so again, it's always a week late, and preliminary uncertified information shows that there might be a little bit of a plateauing right now, but if you look, we're also working with Essentia Health, so the county data looks at the past. The Essentia forecasting looks into the future, and if we're looking into the future modeling, there's concern of additional rise. We didn't get as much of a grace period from the mask wearing. There's some impact from the mask wearing, but it wasn't quite as impactful as they were hoping.
And one thing I wanted to point out is, school districts were charged with providing childcare to essential workers, which is a large task. And here in Duluth, in particular, we have a huge percentage of our labor force who work in healthcare, and healthcare is, a frontline critical sector from the governor's perspective in terms of the district's responsibility for providing childcare. So that's partly why we have such high numbers of kids who are needing or eligible for that childcare, and a huge responsibility on the school district to provide that childcare to support the healthcare sector that's centered in Duluth. Okay. So the person was asking, on the scale that determines which model, the cases per 10,000, the person was wondering where we are at in Duluth or in southern St. Louis County in terms of cases per 10,000. Do you know that right now?
Sure, and I'm clicking between to bring up the current number. So the current number is in the high teens, nearing 20, but it's been going at a very accelerated rate upwards for the past 2-week period. And so that was a big part of the concern, is that we want to make sure that we are thoughtful of where the numbers will be at when school starts, as well as where the numbers are at the current time. Because if the current numbers are continuing to increase, that puts us in a place where people aren't feeling safe. We also, part of it too, when we were looking at in-person for elementary, the class sizes, particularly in our east side schools, there was boundary work that was started by the district but not completed. That's something we're going to have to get back into very, very soon. That's something that is part of my 100-day entry plan. But because of our class sizes on the east side, even if you split those classes into a hybrid model where things are, or I'm sorry, not a hybrid model, but if it's in person, you can't really expect any social distancing in that area. We'd have over 30, sometimes even close to 40 kids in our classes, and there wouldn't be anything even approximating social distancing in that perspective.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I'm not sure if the superintendent's able to stick around for the Q&A at the end. But I totally understand if you have to jump off and head to your next meeting. If we have follow-up questions, we can get them to you and share the answers with folks. So thank you for being here. Dave, I wanted to give you a quick opportunity to just talk about plans for the other school districts in the surrounding Duluth.
Yeah, I'll be quick, Elena. I know that we've got a bit of a time crunch. One of the things that I noticed in visiting with the different districts was how much creativity is involved right now and how much agility they have to have. I mean, just from last night to this morning, I received 4 or 5 emails, just correcting a detail here, a detail there. So thank you anyways. So we have a couple of school districts I want to run past you. So Proctor is a pretty close mirror to Duluth. The Rail Strong advisory meetings are still in place. Start of the school year has been pushed to the 15th of September. Elementary school kids are hybrid, but the 6 through 12 kids are going to be distance only, but families can opt out of the hybrid at any time. Hermantown is hybrid with classes Tuesdays and Thursdays or Wednesdays and Fridays. Monday classes are 100% virtual, and families in hybrid will attend the same days throughout the district. So if you've got, you know, an elementary school kid, a middle school kid, and a high school kid, they will be attending school on the same days. Southridge right now is starting 100% in school. They've changed their school schedule to incorporate more sections. They are maintaining their end of the day. So if somebody's working in Duluth, it looks like the 2 o'clock end date or end time is the same. Two Harbors is doing something interesting. They have they're doing hybrid Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday style. They have a 4-day school week. Their AM and PM cohorts. So the AM cohort is for people that are bused. So if you are on a school district bus in the Two Harbors district, you will be in the AM cohort. And if you are in the PM cohort, that means you're getting to school another way, you know, whether it be parents driving or kids with their own driver's license. And all students will be provided with a district device. Silver Bay is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, hybrid. Elementary ed is in person or virtual right now. Of course, agility is keep that in mind. Cloquet is a little less clear. The district's been meeting here during the next week to have more details. Renshaw is going to be hybrid, but they are meeting in school every other Wednesday. They've created an outdoor space to have larger classes in. And I know that I think it was the New York Times picked up on this, and there's a little article about what Renshaw is doing unique, trying to make a unique solution. Cromwell's in school. They're in school and they have regular class schedules. Carleton is starting with students in classrooms, but the expectation is that they'll be going to hybrid. So that's the quick and dirty.
That's great. Thank you, Dave. Superintendent Magas, I had 2 follow-up questions for you. One, just confirming that for elementary students who will be going to school for 2 days a week, the first 2 weeks of school are going to be entirely virtual still. I know that was the plan. I assume that's still
Yes.
the plan. And then the other question, before and after school care through Keyzone, do you know what's the status on that? So this is for families who aren't eligible for the child care for essential workers, just sort of other families. What's the current availability of before and after school care for those families?
So the before and after school care we're first actually, and this is kind of a point that is sometimes seems a little foreign and takes a little getting our head around it, that by state mandate, we have to first prioritize the child care for the essential workers, even before we prioritize the learning for our students in the district. And so that is something that is a challenge because again, we want to provide child care, of course, but also when we're trying to balance the learning needs of the district, and we have to choose first what is the best plan to make sure childcare happens. That's part of why, in some ways, our plan might seem more restrictive, based partly on the COVID numbers and partly for the childcare needs. But related to Keyzone has been partnering with us very closely, and we hope to have additional information out related to Keyzone. I know that they will be working with us on before and after school programming. But the capacity for before and after school, if the regular slots are filled with emergency essential care or essential workers, we would have to determine whether or not there are slots left available for the before and after care. I want to provide as much as we can. And I know this is a very, very difficult time for us. And I also am open to very creative partnerships with other organizations. So that we can do this in most efficient and fair way.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, so I want to move on now to Corey Walton from the Department of Labor and Industry. He's going to provide an overview of paid leave requirements. So Corey, you should be able to share your screen, I hope.
I've been trying, but I get the host disabled participant screen sharing rejection. So I can't right now.
Okay. All right. So here's what I'm going to do for you. I am going to open up your presentation on my computer and share it from my computer.
Sounds good. Yep. Sounds real good. I'm glad I joined early.
Go ahead and introduce yourself while I get that set up.
Sure. I'm glad I joined early because Superintendent Magas taught me some. I like to learn things I don't know, so I've got a lot of information about the school systems. I know there's so many hybrids out there that's hard to keep track. But yeah, my name is Corey Walton. I'm with the U.S. Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division. And our piece of it, our slice of this during the COVID-19 era we live in is the federal paid sick leave provisions. So I'm going to talk about the leave that's required of all employers to give the employees, I should say eligible employees, if they want to take leave for one of 6 reasons that falls under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So these paid sick leave provisions, I always reiterate to the employers, employees, and stakeholders and everything, there's a lot of reasons why people are taking leave under that are COVID-19 related, but under the FFCRA, there's 6 reasons and 6 reasons only that employees can take time off and get the paid leave that the federal law provides. I also want to make the point that this this law is kind of different than most laws in that it has a shelf life. So it became effective April 1st and it expires, as we know now, it's going to expire on New Year's Eve, December 31st. So everything I'm going to cover, it talks about leave provisions and paid leave apply to that time period. Also, I want to say this, there's a lot of employees that were taking leave prior to April 1st. So whether or not that leave was COVID-19 related or not, these provisions that I'm going to talk about only apply from April 1st until December 31st. So you can go, if you would, a couple of slides forward, and I'll just jump right into this. So first I want to talk about, because this is a question we get a lot, especially early on, which employers are covered or are required to provide the leave. And again, this is requirement, this is not optional, these leave provisions. So it helps to look at the employers in a couple of buckets. There's the private sector and then there's the public sector. So if it's a private sector employer and he or she has fewer than 500 employees, and that's a nationwide count, not an establishment count, but a nationwide count, then they're going to be subject to the FFCRA and they have to provide the leave. And that applies to nonprofits as well. The other bucket is the public agency bucket. Regardless of the number of employees that the public agency employs, whether it's 5 or 5,000, they're going to be covered regardless. So private sector, 499 or less, nationwide count, public sector, regardless of the number of employees, they're going to be covered by the FFCRA. Now, this is the point I was making earlier. There's only 6 reasons they can take leave. So we get calls all the time from employees, or employers for that matter, wondering if this falls under FFCRA. And unless it falls into one of these 2 categories or 6 categories, then it wouldn't be FFCRA leave. But what are the qualifying reasons? So the first, just reading from the screen, the employee is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19. Second, the employee has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine. And third, which is a 2-pronged reason, sorta, the employee is experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and he or she is seeking a medical diagnosis. So that third reason, what that's saying is the employees can't unilaterally decide, I got some symptoms, I'm gonna take some time off. They can do that, but it won't qualify for FFCRA leave unless they are also actively, and I'll stick that word actively in there, actively seeking a medical diagnosis. So that's reasons 1 through 3. Reasons 4 through 6, the employee, I probably don't have to read these, but you can see the first one is the employee is caring for an individual who's been subject to an isolation order or caring for someone who's been advised by a healthcare provider. 5th reason, which is a reason a lot of employees are taking time off and have been taking time off, is the parent is caring for his or her child whose school or place of care is closed or the child care provider is unavailable. And the sixth reason, theoretically right now, no one should be taking leave for because Department of HHS has not identified a substantially similar condition. Now they may between now and December 31st, but right now, theoretically, there's only 5 reasons people should be taking FFCRA leave. Okay, so the general rule is, everyone, if you work for a covered employer and you're eligible, and I'll talk about eligibility in a second, then you're entitled to this leave. But there's 2 major exceptions to that rule. There's a small business exemption, and then I'll talk a little bit about the healthcare provider / emergency responder. But how does the small business exemption work? So it's a 3-pronged test. You can kind of look at it like that. So what are the prongs? The first prong is it's a small business with fewer than 50 employees. So if you have 50 employees or more, then this small business exemption is not available. You can't assert it. But let's say you're an employer and you have 49 or less employees. Second prong, the small business exemption is being claimed in response to one reason and one reason only, that the employer is requesting, the employee is requesting the leave. So I went through 6 reasons. If the employee is requesting leave to care for his or her child whose school or place of care is closed, then that's appropriate. If they're asking for leave for any of those other 5 FFCRA reasons, this small business exemption does not apply. It's just in response to that one type of leave. Third prong, requirements of the FFCRA jeopardize the business viability. So let me walk through this real quick and show you how it works. Let's say you're an employee who works for an employer with less than 50 employees, and you approach the employer saying, I need time off because my kid's school is closed. The employer can respond, this is prong 3, the employer can respond saying, I'm sorry, John, we can't let you take time off because your absence would jeopardize the business viability. Those key words right there. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Let's find out what jeopardize the business viability means. What that means is John falls into one of those 3 bullet categories. So for example, John's leave, and I'm reading from the first bullet, John's leave would result in expenses and financial obligations exceeding available business revenues, etc. So John fits into that category. So Martha may come along and 2 weeks later and request leave for that one specific reason, and she may fall under the 3rd bullet, which is insufficient. Reason why we have to deny you the leave, Martha, is because your absence would mean insufficient employees able, willing, and qualified at the time and place needed to perform labor services, etc. So it's an employee by employee small business exemption claim. It's claimed by the employee. I want to make one more point on this slide. That bold language, no application process, etc. What that means is this small business exemption is nothing you have to send in paperwork for or apply for some type of certification or whatever. All the employer has to do, he or she just has to document why John or Martha, whoever fits into one of these categories. And they only have to fit into one, not all 3. And keep that documentation handy in case the DOL inquires. So employee by employee, and it's asserted in response to one type of leave. And you don't have to send any paperwork in for it. Okay. That's the one exemption section. Remember, the overall rule is if the employee is eligible and they work for a covered employer, they should get they must get the leave. Small business exemption is one exception. The other exception is the healthcare provider emergency responder exemption. And right off the bat, big difference between this and the small business exemption is that an employer can claim the healthcare provider / emergency responder exception in response to leave being requested for any of those 6 reasons. So remember, small business is only in response to my kid's school is closed or the care provider is unavailable. Healthcare provider emergency responder exception in response to any of the 6 leave qualifying reasons. Okay, next slide, please. So what does that mean, healthcare provider, and what is emergency responder? Healthcare provider, there's a list of the type of establishments or employers whose personnel would fall into the healthcare provider category. But I want to draw your attention to the first 3 words, and that's anyone employed at. So that's pretty broad. So for example, nursing homes is on this list. And by the way, this language is in the regulations themselves, but nursing home. So if you work the front desk of a nursing home, you are anyone employed at a nursing home. So you, if the employer wants to claim that exemption, the healthcare provider exception or exclusion, they can for that person or any other person employed at that nursing home. And then you can see some other types of facilities that fall into that category. So I don't want to spend too much time on that because that language is in the regulations, as is this language for the emergency responder. Again, this can be in response to any type of leave being requested, any of those 6 reasons under FFCRA. The employer can say, I can't give you the leave because you're an emergency responder and you fit into one of these categories we see on the screen. Again, this language is in the regulations. Okay, so up until now, I've been kind of addressing the FFCRA, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, as a whole, as an umbrella. Underneath that umbrella are 2 components. There's the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, and then there's the expanded FMLA. So I'm going to separate those out right now because they're different. I'm going to show you how. So first bullet, 6 qualifying COVID-19 reasons related. So in other words, for EFMLEA leave, in that component of FFCRA, the employee can take leave for any of those 6 reasons that I talked about, reasons 1 through 6. Theoretically, right now, there's only 5 reasons. Second bullet, just like the old-fashioned FMLA, during the leave, the continuation of the health insurance provided by the employer stays on track. And the third bullet, entitlement, how much leave. So under the EFMLEA, full-time employees, based on their schedule, up to 80 hours. So if you work 40 hours a week times 2 weeks, you get 80 hours max as far as EFMLEA leave. If you are part-time, for example, you work 25 hours a week times 2 weeks, you get 50 hours. If you have employees or you know employers who have employees whose schedules fluctuate or vary from week to week, like is the case for a lot of part-time employees, then I'm gonna try to remember to paste the link in the chat box after I'm done to our frequently asked questions document. In that document, questions 80 through 85 walk employers through the formula they are to use if you have, for example, a part-time or part-time employees whose schedules are up and down or fluctuate. So there is a formula if your schedule is not set, okay? All right. Eligible, which employees are eligible to take this EFMLEA leave? The first bullet is pretty much the eligibility requirement in a nutshell. All employees who work for a covered employer are eligible. So theoretically, if an employee was hired this morning, they could put in for the leave this afternoon, for example. So all you have to do is be on the payroll for this EFMLEA component. There's a reminder of what a covered employer looks like, but I just want to draw the attention to that eligibility requirement. Just have to be on the payroll for EFMLEA, okay? How much leave are the employees entitled to per leave hour taken? The best approach to this is for the employer to have certain rates on their radar, and then they're going to pluck out the highest rate. So the rates they have to consider are these. First, the employee's regular rate of pay. So if you have an hourly employee who's paid $15 an hour, and they've been at $15 an hour over the last year or two, that's going to be their regular rate, assuming they have no other form of compensation on top of that. That's one rate. FLSA, the minimum wage, the Fair Labor Standards Act minimum wage today is $7.25. That rate has to be on your radar. And then let's say for purposes of illustration, the employer is subject to the Minneapolis municipal minimum wage rate, which for large employers right now is $13.25. So state rate is $10 for large employers. Local rate in Minneapolis is $13.25. So those are the rates on the employer's radar. The $15 regular rate, the $7.25 federal rate, state rate $10, and local rate $13.25. Obviously, the highest of that is the $15 regular rate of the employee. That's the one you pluck out. So what do you do with it? I'll show you in the next slide. What you do with it, what the employer does with that rate depends on what the employee is requesting the leave for. If the employee is requesting leave for reasons 1, 2, or 3, and there's a reminder on the screen of what those reasons are, then the employee is entitled to be paid 100% of that regular rate. In my example, that's $15 an hour. They're paid for each leave hour. And there's a cap of $511 a day or $51.10 in a 2-week time period. To reach that cap, you got to have, it's astronomical hourly rate. So virtually all employees are going to be below that cap. But again, reasons 1 through 3, the full regular rate, 100% of that regular rate, okay? As opposed to reasons 4, 5, or 6. If the employee is requesting leave for reason 4, 5, or 6, they're not entitled to the full regular rate, just 2/3 of that rate. So in my example, that's $10. So $10 is 2/3 of $15. So what the employee is requesting the leave for has everything to do and determines how much they're paid per leave hour. And there's a cap of $200 a day and $2,000 for that 2-week time period for one of these, what I call 2/3 reasons. Okay, 1 through 3, 100% of the regular rate. Reasons 4 through 6, 2/3 of that rate. That's their hourly pay per leave hour. Now, set aside the EPSLA, that's its own component. Now I'm going to bring the other component under the FFCRA umbrella, and that's the Emergency Family and Medical Leave Expansion Act, which I call the expanded FMLA. Okay. So right into the next slide. So right off the bat, you notice the difference in the eligibility and what the leave can be taken for. So first bullet, the employee can only use EMFLA, or the expanded FMLA, to care for his or her son or daughter whose school is closed or the child care provider is unavailable. I think this is on the next slide, but I'm really anxious to talk about it. So I want to highlight the difference between the eligibility requirement for the expanded FMLA as opposed to the EPSLA. For the expanded FMLA, there's a 30 calendar day employment requirement. So the employee had to have been on the payroll at least 30 days in advance of the day they want to take the leave. So that EPSLA leave just has to be on the payroll. Expanded FMLA have to be on the payroll for at least 30 days prior to the day they start the leave. Big difference, the other big difference is the first bullet. The employee can only request expanded FMLA leave for that one reason and one reason only, as opposed to EPSLA, any of the 6 reasons. Another big difference, bullet number 2, the amount of leave. EPSLA, 2-week, 80-hour cap. Expanded FMLA, up to 12 work weeks. So more leave, but for only one reason. Third bullet, initial 2 weeks are unpaid. So the initial 2-week period for the expanded FMLA, as the law is written, is an unpaid period. But put an asterisk by that, because I'm going to show you in a second how the employee can convert that to a paid period. But regardless of what he or she does, the employee, that last bullet, the remaining 10 weeks is paid at 2/3 the regular rate. Again, 2/3 because it falls into reasons 4 through 6. Okay. There's the 30-day eligibility requirement. I did jump the gun a little bit, but I've already explained to you how that works, so we can just move on to the next slide. One point I want to make about FMLA, traditional FMLA and expanded FMLA, the EPSLA sits alone. That's its own type of leave. But the expanded FMLA and the traditional FMLA, if you combine those two, the employee is only entitled to 12 work weeks total. So if an employee took 12 work weeks back in January before this law came into being, and they used all their FMLA leave, then they couldn't take any leave under the expanded FMLA until the next leave year starts. So I want to make that point, that combined FMLA, expanded FMLA, total 12 work weeks. Okay. I said I was going to mention, I just remember that I omitted this slide in the interest of time, but just in case this matters to someone, that the initial 2-week unpaid time period under the expanded FMLA can be converted to a 2-week paid period if the employee does one of 2 things, and it's their choice. The employer can't require it. Number 1, they can slide that 2 weeks of EPSLA leave and plug it into the first 2 weeks of expanded, turn it into a paid period. Or the employee can elect to use the employer's PTO time, whatever system they have in place. If they have accrued hours, the employee can elect to use those hours and plug that into that unpaid period and change it into a paid period. So these FFCRA resources that you see on the screen now are very good. I'm gonna paste some chat links into the chat box, but the key one, your go-to document, is the FAQ. Lots of questions are answered there. So I know I sped through a lot of this. Hopefully everyone kind of grasped the highlights and you know where to go if you have some more questions.
Well, thank you, Corey. Are you okay with us sharing the PowerPoint with the attendees today?
You know what? I'm going to send you the bigger version. I kind of scaled that down. Let me share you. I'll send you the big version. You can share that with them.
Wonderful. That was a question in the chat, so we'll get that out to all the attendees.
Okay.
Thanks again.
You
Up
bet.
next, we have Laura Weintraub. She's the co-owner of AimClear Marketing Agency, and she's going to talk a little bit about their approach to their staff during COVID-19. So welcome, Laura.
All right, thanks, Martha. just want to share a little bit about what we're doing and what, struggles we're having and all of that. I mean, right now, under the governor's order, we technically can't, require our employees to come into the office. We have plenty of space if they want to. So what we've been doing is if someone wants to come in for a day here or there, they certainly can, and we have plenty of space for them to socially distance. They can be in separate offices or breakout rooms and that sort of thing. And we've been doing that since everything shut down. I still come in every day because the mail's still being delivered, and frankly, I work better, in my office than I did in my home at a card table. So, and we're working with our employees who have children. They're being creative. We're trying to be creative in terms of what can work. Most of them have a spouse or a partner at home, and so they're able to sort of split up the day with their kids so that they can focus on their work things during certain hours and their family other hours, and sort of swap that out with them. Sometimes we're doing some alternative hours. Maybe they get up a little earlier or they work a little later when a spouse or partner gets home to be with the kids and help with distance learning. And a lot of it is just about being, really as understanding as possible. And that's a two-way street that of course gets built way before something like this happens, that we trust our employees to get their work done. And they trust us to make the right decisions for the broader business. We're lucky that we haven't had to, lay anybody off at this point. Our business is still, moving along pretty well. In our office, where, if someone does come in, we have masks, we have gloves, we have, sanitizer every place. We've switched to, instead of having sort of family meals or family, larger opportunities for things, we've switched to single pack for snacks, what you would put in your kid's lunchbox and those types of things. So just those types of small steps and just keeping the conversation open. As a company, what we do is at least twice a week, we all get on a Zoom like this and talk. For the first couple of months, it was just really just to make sure that we were connecting with each other, just to see how things were going. We've now morphed that into once a week as a training. Sometimes it's a 10-minute training, sometimes it's a half-hour training. If there's a new development in the industry or we're reviewing our company values, those types of things. The second one is always a fun one. We always try and pick some theme, and actually it's been a really cool experience to learn a little bit more about our employees and each other. One time it was like, what's the ugliest thing in your house? And people would show, different things, or sometimes this week is back to school pictures. What's the smallest thing in your house? And so that's been really a lot of fun, and just to get to know people on a much different level that you wouldn't necessarily do in the office. So in that respect, that's been a really cool development. It'll make some interesting ideas for Christmas presents if we do, some sort of a Secret Santa thing this year as well. So, my advice is just be as compassionate and open as you can with your employees. We are noticing a couple more people coming into the office occasionally, I think just for a change of scenery and to be able to focus. And that seems to be working right now. We haven't been too impacted by the school district changes, simply because we can't require our employees to come back in anyway. So it's sort of status quo from what it was last spring. Should that all change, then we'll deal with that at that point. But right now it's just, everybody's doing a good job of getting their work done, of communicating, and it's just really bridging those communications between the teams. That's the biggest challenge.
Great, thank you. Well, I think I'll turn it over to Sean Herhusky with, he's going to host our Q&A session. So, Sean?
Good morning, everybody. I think it's still morning. Yeah, it's 11 o'clock. My name is Sean Herhusky. I'm a workforce strategy consultant with Deed. and I get the awesome job of handling the Q&A. I just want to say thank you for everybody that posted in chat, everybody that posted in the Q&A box. So we will go ahead and jump right into it. Our first question is actually going to be for Superintendent John Magas. And it is it possible to learn about what the day will look like for distance learning and hybrid kids on the days they are learning at home?
Sure. So there are quite a few things that I can point out. I think it would be challenging to go through all of the details, but if you, that Return to Learn website that I showed you earlier, there are links there that go to past board presentations as well as some videos that we put together. Our next video that should be coming out tomorrow or Friday, we're producing 2 this week because we have so much going on, but one was about why did we make the model change? The second one is what are some of the descriptions of what the distance learning will look like for our learners in distance learning at secondary as well as hybrid. But just a little bit more about that is we have purchased 2 new learning management systems, which are basically, if you've ever taken an online class, they kind of form the shell of the work, and it gives you opportunity to have, you know, syllabi and different assignments and stuff in different areas. But it also allows for posting of videos, connecting students in small chat groups, and really functioning at a higher level than Google Meet. We had been using Google Hangouts and Google Meet for a lot of our work in the spring, and really in the spring there wasn't a lot of even digital work. It was mostly packets, and so it's going way beyond what we had with just that emergency packet distribution into making sure that we have digital learning opportunities. We've also purchased digital content to supplement what the teacher activities will be. So sometimes I'm a parent too, and sometimes when I looked at the digital learning that my own sons were working on, it's kind of like worksheet after worksheet after worksheet. And if it doesn't make it any more exciting or engaging for a student to have a worksheet that you're doing online as opposed to a worksheet that's printed out and you're filling out with a pencil. So we want to make sure that the content is very engaging, and that's why we've worked with a number of different content providers to provide us with content for many of our core classes. And we've also worked with the AEO, which is our online academy, around making sure that we have access to their classes as well. So instead of just every teacher making up every lesson, they will be looking at their curricular guides and making sure that the activities really match high quality activities. Some people are wondering too, is it going to be synchronous? And by synchronous, that's the 2 big buzzwords are, is it synchronous or asynchronous? And a year ago, I probably wouldn't have really thought about what that meant, but now it's everybody in education talks about it. Synchronous is our kids joining in the learning at all times, like sitting at their computer, going through their schedule and engaging in classes as they like walk through their virtual day? Or is there asynchronous learning where there are opportunities for students that they can do their work at any time? We are going to have some of both, but there would be a lot more asynchronous learning, partly because of our we realize that there are childcare needs of parents where older siblings might be helping out with younger siblings. We also realize that not every child, we're currently, because of we're increasing our devices, but we don't have a complete one-to-one. And so making sure that we have those devices, sometimes there might be 2 siblings sharing a device. If that's the case, or if there's 2 parents working from home and 2 kids trying to get on and the Wi-Fi is not enough, we want to make sure that we have opportunities for kids to catch up. But we also want to make sure that they have options for live support as well. I know I kind of gave a long one, but I know that's a big question for people.
No, that's a very thorough answer, and that was actually going to be my follow-up. So thank you very much for doing that. We do have a lot of questions for Corey Walton. So just wanted to kind of tee him up a little bit. A lot of questions about his presentation. The first one is, we've implemented a child at work policy that allows employees to work from home and or have their child at the workplace if the school is closed? Can an employee still request and receive time off under FFCRA with this policy in place? And if yes, does it need to be full days off, or say, could they take 2 hours off at a time in the morning to assist in virtual learning and then work the remaining 6?
Question, because a lot of people are asking that question. So I'll answer the first part first. Yes, if the school is closed, and by the way, the link for the frequently asked question comes in handy right now. In that document, question number 21 answers this question. So it probably answers it a lot more eloquently than I will, but it's there. So yes, the short answer is yes. If the employee needs time because the child's at home because the school is closed, then that's reason number 5. So that's, as long as I'm assuming that the school is closed and the employee is needed. Now, I should make this point too. When the employee is at home taking care of the child, if the employer has set up a structure for home working that allows them to put in their 8 hours and take care of the child, then FFCRA wouldn't apply. But if the employee does need some of those work hours to take care of their child, then they're allowed to take FFCRA under reason number 3. Reason number 4. The second part of your question is, yes, intermittent use of the leave. So as long as the employer agrees or signs off on the intermittent use of the leave, then yes, the employee can take it intermittently anytime between now and December 31st. But again, the employer has to allow. Otherwise, it has to be taken in a chunk. And most employers I've been finding are allowing the intermittent use.
Excellent.
Hope that answers the question.
I believe it does. Thank you, Corey. There is another question that kind of is on the same lines. Does the FFCRA apply to consecutive days?
Yep, I did see that, Sean. You're right. That's I think they're asking the intermittent. So it doesn't have to be taken in a chunk as long as the employer allows it to be taken intermittently. I should point this out too. I don't know if this comes into play with the person who's asking the question, but the DOL guidance also says that if you're taking leave for any reason other than the reason number 5, and that's for the employee needs time because their kid's school is closed or the child care provider is unavailable. If you're working in the office and you want to take it intermittently for any of those other 5 reasons, it has to be taken in a whole chunk. Because obviously, we wouldn't want people coming in and out of the office, for example, if they have symptoms and they're seeking a medical diagnosis. So if it's for any of those other 5 reasons, other than the school closed, child care provider unavailable, if the employee is working in the office, it has to be taken in a chunk. Intermittent use is not available. But teleworking, what I said before, applies. As long as the employer signs off on the intermittent use, it can be used that way.
Thank you.
For any other reasons. Yeah.
We do have a couple more,
Okay.
if that's okay. One
Absolutely.
question was about a specific scenario. A child has been exposed to a positive case and required by the school to stay home for 14 days. Assuming family had no previous need for daycare and therefore not available, is the employee eligible for expanded FMLA?
That's a really good question because it highlights the difference between EPSLA and expanded. So remember, under the expanded FMLA, there's one reason and one reason only employees can take leave, and that's because the school is closed. It sounds like in this fact pattern, this scenario, the school is open, but the child has been exposed and needs some care for that reason. That's reason number 4. That's not reason number 5. Why does that make a difference? Because now the reason they need time off, the leave they take is going to fall under EPSLA leave that only allows for 2 weeks, cap of 80 hours. So reason number 5 is only if the school is closed, and that's why they need to care for their child. But that reason goes away under this scenario because the reason why they need leave is because their child's been exposed. That's reason number 4. And again, that falls under EPSLA, and that only allows for 80 hours total maximum. So it's going to be a lot less leave because it's not for the reason that the school is closed. It's taking care of a child who may have been exposed. So again, and there's also, assuming the requirements of that reason are met too. For example, if they have symptoms, you have to be seeking a medical diagnosis. So those things still have to be happening. But I want to highlight the difference between taking time off because this kid's school is closed versus a child that's been exposed.
Thank you very much for that. We've got a similar question that might actually be in the same vein. We had a question about taking a combination of leave, which is kind of what we've been discussing. But the example here was a daycare is closed due to a COVID positive teacher. Child has to quarantine, parent has to care for the child. So it's a very similar question to the ones we've been talking about before. Can the employee take 2/3 pay and then if they want to compensate for the 1/3 with vacation or other leave?
Yeah, so again, I kind of rushed through the presentation. The employee does have the options. So during the EFMLA 2-week time period, the employee does have the option of electing to use the PTO time that the employer provides and then bringing that 2/3 up to full 100% of the regular rate. That's an employee option they can exercise. I'm assuming they meet the requirements for the use of the PTO leave, whatever those requirements are of the employer. So that's an option. Also, what is an option is during that first 2 weeks of unpaid expanded FMLA, the employee has the exact same options. He or she can use the employer's provided PTO time that's accrued to that point, plug that in, and if that's the case, then they have to be paid not 2/3, but 100%. And the third option, remember I talked about during the presentation, is let's say they're taking time off. Well, I guess it wouldn't fall into this category if the reason's not the school is closed. So if it's under EPSLA and it sounds like this would be an EPSLA reason, then the answer is yes. The employee can take the employer's provided PTO time, plug it in there, and move that 2/3 to 100% of the regular rate. And the employer is obligated to pay. Once the employee elects to use that PTO, the employer is obligated to pay not 2/3, but the full rate they would pay if they were taking the PTO for any other reason.
And a lot of these questions are sort of variations on the same theme that we're talking about, but I do want to make sure that we ask them simply because I did mention that I would. One question is, does the daycare or school need to be closed or can it be unavailable to the child? The example that they give, if the family's been exposed and getting testing and the provider is not accepting the child pending test results, can the parent access these benefits?
Good question. It's that reason number 5 is pretty specific. The school or place of care has to be unavailable or closed. Now, is it unavailable? That would be something, that's a good question. And that's something I probably wouldn't try to answer on this webinar. That would be something, we get tons of questions that we have to run up to our regional office. And that sounds like that would fall into that bucket. So my email address is in the chat box. So if you ask that question, you wanted to answer, that's probably something I'd feel safer with running it up the chain. That's a good question though.
We really appreciate you providing your email address to the people that are attending today so that they can ask those types of follow-up questions.
Sure.
One thing I want to touch on, I know we've kind of touched on this one as well, in regards to remote work. Can you confirm that employees who work remotely may not qualify for the expanded FMLA?
No, you qualify as long as the reason is fulfilled. In other words, it meets the requirements of reason number 5. That works for whether or not you're working in the office or you're working teleworking. So it doesn't make a difference where you're working at. It just makes a difference whether or not it meets the requirements under 5. So that's the school being closed, child care provider being unavailable. So even for people who are teleworking, that's available as long as they meet that threshold, those requirements.
Thank you, Corey. We've had some additional questions too about the intermittent leave, but I think we've gone over that. If the person who asked the question has any additional follow-up questions, feel free to throw it in chat. And if you don't feel like your question's been answered by Corey already.
Hey,
go ahead,
Sean,
Corey.
Yeah, I want to make one point because there's a buzz that's being created, and I would be remiss if I didn't at least talk about it. There was a court case in New York. The state of New York sued the Department of Labor, and there was 4 issues in that court case that the court resolved. I think it was the Southern District of New York. So far, we have not been told to enforce the FFCRA any differently outside of New York, and I haven't been advised to provide any additional information or different information than I've been providing. So if you read about that court case in New York, just know for everyone that's not in New York, the FFCRA is going to be enforced and compliance assistance will be given the way we've been giving it since April 1st.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Now, if we have any information about that case, we'll try to provide that as well. I know we've had a lot of questions. We do have a follow-up actually to a previous question. It looks like I'd asked about taking a leave for partial days, for example, 2 hours out of an 8-hour day. Corey seemed to indicate that was okay, but FAQ seemed to indicate that it must be a whole day. Can you clarify?
Yeah, so if you're taking leave for 5 reasons, so any reason other than the school being closed, childcare provider, once you take that leave, if you're working in the office, it has to be taken in a chunk, can't be taken intermittently. If you're working from home and you request leave for any of those 6 reasons, that can be taken intermittently for under any of those qualifying reasons. So the difference is intermittent, and again, intermittent use in both situations can only be used if the employer allows the intermittent use. But I want to draw the highlight to whether or not you're working in the office versus whether or not you're working at home. Working at home, as long as the employer agrees to intermittent use for any reason. Working in the office, intermittently, only for one reason, reason number 5.
And thank you again for feeling that.
Absolutely. That's a tough one to sort of wrap your mind around. And when you look at the Q&A document, it may get a little confusing. Just make sure in your mind, draw the difference between in the office and remote or at home.
Absolutely. We did have a question about the definition of son or daughter. Does it mean biological or adopted, or can it be a split family child situation?
The FFCRA adopts the same definition as the traditional FMLA, so it can be adopted, it can be a ward of the court, that kind of thing. It can be a foster child. It can also be what the FMLA uses, that Latin term in loco parentes. So, you know, someone who's standing in as a parent, it can be used for that purposes. So I would encourage anyone to look at fact sheet 28, which is our DOL FMLA fact sheet. It has the definition, or kind of goes through the definition of son or daughter, but it does match, the FFCRA definition of son and daughter does match the traditional FMLA definition.
Okay.
Hope that answers the question.
I believe it does. But there is one question too that might be something for Elena or myself or even you, Corey. Our current state governor's order states that we need to allow workers to work from home to the extent practical. As school is beginning, we're putting return to work guidelines in place. Some work groups that don't directly serve students face-to-face, examples given are payroll, technology, human resources, maybe asking for exemption to work from home. Productivity and ability to support has some impact. However, to what degree should to the extent practical apply in such cases?
Yeah, so from a DOL standpoint, that doesn't sound like we would get involved with those type of decisions that are made as far as the employer's policy, who's going to work from home and for why. So we would just step in once they do decide to work from home, teleworking, we just step in and say, okay, what can they take leave for and what doesn't qualify as FFCRA leave. But the decision itself, as far as working from home and who will and why, that's something DOL wouldn't have anything to do with.
Yeah, that would be a question more that me and myself or Elena could probably do some research on. I work with the Department of Employment and Economic Development, Elena with the City of Duluth Workforce. We might be able to get some more clarification on that and provide that out. So that is what I have for a Q&A. I want to thank everybody again who asked questions. I hope we provide the answers that you're looking for. If not, reach out and we can do any follow-up with any of the panelists here. And I believe at this time, I'm going to be handing it back to Elena Foshay.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. So thanks everyone for your contributions and for asking and answering questions. And I know this is complicated and we're all kind of figuring it out as we go and interpreting the laws. I just wanted to share some concluding thoughts on what it means to create a supportive workplace. So Sean, can you see my screen? Okay, great. So these are just kind of some concluding thoughts. So, you know, for one, for sure, offer maximum flexibility in the daily work schedule. And this is kind of what Laura was talking about, right? You know, when you're a working parent and you're juggling multiple devices and homeschooling and whatever, for some jobs, there are certain times of the day when you have to perform that job. But for a lot of jobs, especially those where you can do the work from home, you can be a little bit more expansive in when the work gets done, as long as it gets done. And I would encourage employers to look into new workflow management tools. There's lots of them out there to help, you know, track tasks and give employees maximum flexibility and autonomy in getting their work done, but allowing supervisors to sort of just track that it's getting done. If possible, allow employees to work part-time if needed, or to be flexible about how many hours in each week they work. And I know there's some workplaces where that's not going to be an option, but if it is an option, you know, that'll allow the employee to ride the wave. And, you know, if a kid or a family member happens to test positive and now needs to be quarantined, and that, you know, throws the whole schedule off course for a couple weeks, you know, just allowing some flexibility in moving to part-time as needed. For workplaces that can't allow employees to work from home, you know, because of the type of workplace it is, plan ahead for covering shifts. If schools suddenly close, if there needs to be a quick pivot because of a positive case or experiencing symptoms. And most employers have done that and have been doing this for the past several months. But, you know, just making sure there's a plan A, B, C, and D in place to make sure shifts are covered. And just know that employees could need to stay home on a dime. This is a big one. Just make sure that you're super clear on what paid leave policies are. There's what federal law says, there's what state law says, but then there's some level of paid leave policies which are determined by the employers. And just make sure that all of that is clearly defined, that employees are clear on it, so that when a situation comes up, there's not a scrambling to try to do research on what the law says and figure out which kind of leave to apply for. It's better to just provide that information up front so that the employee knows what their options are, the employer knows what they can say yes to for the employee. Understand that employees may be sharing devices and internet bandwidth. It's true that school is going to be mostly asynchronous, but there will be some synchronous learning. And, you know, every family is a different situation, and not every family is able to provide a device to every person that needs it. So, you know, I know with my staff, for example, there's some that have a hard time turning their video on during meetings when there's kids who are logged in doing their schoolwork at the same time. And we just are understanding of that and flexible. And then the last thing, the last thought I had was, you know, every employer is required to have a COVID preparedness plan and provide that to employees. That's something that we all should have in place by now. But really look at it again and make sure it clearly addresses a procedure for a positive test result or a family member who is getting tested but doesn't have the result yet. Make sure you have clarity around your procedure for that. That was a situation that we encountered as an employer where we had a very detailed plan, everything thought out, but then the situation came up where an employee's family member had to go get tested, but it took several days for the results to come back, and we realized we hadn't addressed that in the plan, and that did end up having an impact on the employee's ability to come in and work in the office. So we had to quick revise our plan to think through that scenario. So, you know, take another look, think through all the possible scenarios, and really think about, you know, there's a lot of the plans address what happens if the employee has symptoms or a positive test, but what happens if a child or a family member that the employee lives with has symptoms or a positive test. And then the last thing I'll say, you know, some questions have come up about unemployment insurance eligibility. There is expanded eligibility for unemployment insurance right now. So there is a possibility that where paid leave doesn't cover the employee's wages for different situations. Unemployment insurance might step in, and there's, there's more detail on the state UI website to answer those questions about in what situations would you go and apply for unemployment insurance. But just kind of keep that in mind, that that's another, it's not something that employers should depend on to fill gaps, but it is something that an employee might be able to turn to fill gaps. So just, I also have resources to share. So we can share out these slides at the end. One in particular I wanted to point out, which I think is an underappreciated, incredible resource, which is a site where families can access childcare providers, information about childcare providers in their community. This was newly developed to try to meet need for first responders, but really it applies to any family who's seeking childcare. So the link to the website is on the slide. Feel free to check it out. So with that, I will end. Thank you so much to all of our presenters, to all the folks who participated and asked questions. I really appreciate it. This is a timely topic. And thank you very much for being a part of the conversation. With that, Martha, any last things before we end?
Well, just wanted to thank CareerForce for co-hosting this event, and all of the panelists for joining us, and our attendees. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone.